Hello dreamers, you asked me, and so in this tutorial I will show you the most important steps of this little film that I made. In detail we'll see the staging with the change of camera and the elements that I used to give this effect, as if the viewer approached the balustrade to look beyond and discover the city. How I created the lighting, this time with the frame-by-frame technique, in two different ways. One more direct and one more organized, a method that is the basis of one of the fundamental principles of animations, and that if you don't know, it will be useful for you to understand. Talking a little about the channel, we are reaching 500 subscribers. I will be very happy to celebrate this milestone with you, and I thank you for your continued support. Let's continue like this by discovering all the secrets of dreams. Like the video, activate the bell, and as always, in my projects there is a cosmic delirium of tracks, dancing together even if the dance can become dangerous. I'm going to hide some elements to have a clear vision of the staging. First of all, let's remove the rain. If you haven't seen this effect, check out the tutorial I created previously. Let's see if I can find the groups. This is the first group that I hide the rain in the foreground. The scene is already clear. Now I remove the drops that fall. Now with the scene clear, we began to see the elements that make up the scene. The first is the ground. In this case I drew a frontal plane on Procreate. Imported into Dreams and with the distortion tool put in perspective. Using distortion to create planes with the correct depth is very interesting, especially because it helps us to have a three-dimensional vision of what we want to show and gives us an idea of the right perspective. If we have to insert other elements, such as the railing in the background. My goal was to make the viewer walk on this ground, get closer to the railing and look beyond. With two simple elements I created a camera movement, and later we'll see that the camera movement combined with the blur filters make the viewer's attention change, first on the ground in the foreground and then on the city in the background. Before taking you beyond the balustrade, let's see a very important element that I added to create the effect of wet ground, which becomes like a body of water, slightly agitated by the wind. To make it, I just had to duplicate the railing level, invert and move it underneath. With the Alter tool and the Performance mode, I gently shock the layer to give it movement. Imagine the reflections on the water. For example, they will not be perfectly still, but react to the wavy movement of the fluid. Keep moving towards the balustrade. The elements of the terrain and the railing begin to blur and the city behind, which appeared blurry, begins to be glimpsed. The blur effects and zoom into the city allow the viewer to shift his focus from the foreground to what is happening in the background. The balustrade remains visible towards the bottom but blurred, to give depth to the scene. Leaving an element in the foreground out of focus does not distract the viewer's vision, but rather helps him focus his attention on what is happening in the background. This technique is used, for example, in the world of cinema and is called rack focus or focus pull, and is used to change the point of attention from one subject to another. Bringing the attention closer to the city, I inserted another element that distracts the vision from railing, the lights. There is a middle ground between the foreground and the background, as if there was a road full of cars speeding by. I hide some lighting flashes so we can focus better on this intermediate plane. These elements that move left and right are the headlights of the cars that pass on this road, and without the need to draw the cars but only with the use of the lights, the road comes to life. This intermediate level accompanies the viewer's eyes until they shift their attention to the city and keeps the animation alive and organic. Add camera and blur changes to your projects between the subjects of your scenes to shift the focus to what you want to show. I removed some more flashes so you can better appreciate the movement of the car lights. Let's go and discover the other details of the scene. I also hide these lights on the middle floor. What we will see now are the two levels that make up the city. There are two main levels that form the city, and obviously I didn't draw them, but I took the PNG file from Google. By now you know my laziness in drawing. I would have spent hours to do a job like this. My main goal here was to create this fantastic animation. The first level we find is this one. With the lens blur filter in the initial part it will be out of focus. I used lens blur instead of blur because it helps to accentuate the highlights in this case. On the movement, instead, in the first part of level gets closer to the viewer and then zoom out to have a better overview of the city. I discovered a part of the city behind, and also in this case there is the lens blur filter to change the focus and the zoom movement. My intention here, in addition to changing the focus, was to create a parallax effect that gives a feeling of vertigo to make the viewer perceive the height of the skyscrapers. And by inserting a third element, the airship, allows the viewer to have a correct and proportionate vision. The element that we are going to discover now is the sky, which is composed of lighting flashes and clouds. Let's start from the clouds. There are two layers that move from right to left that form the clouds, and in this case I also used the distortion tool to move them in a perspective way. The levels are both the same, but they move slightly differently. This is the level I drew here directly on Dreams, with the Rainforest Organic brush. I then moved on to distortion and movement, and as for the plane that forms the ground, with the distortion I was able to obtain the correct perspective. If you haven't seen it yet, recently I made a tutorial on distortion that I used to animate the spaceships in my Star Wars short film. I suggest you go and get it. Before moving on to the frame-by-frame animation of the lighting, I also added some flashes behind the clouds to give a greater three-dimensionality to the sky. And now the highlight of today. I think my first tutorial on frame-by-frame here on Dreams. Let me know in the comments if you are interested in more tutorials on this technique. New tutorials may arrive in the future. In this short I made two different types of frame-by-frame animation. The one we see first on this lighting is the simplest and least organized. Here frame by frame I drew the lighting animation. It starts very small on the right, then explode and dissolve to the left. This animation technique is called direct, and in this case I start at one point and draw the frames in succession, in a random way. It's simply if used as here to create a special effect. But if for example we have to rotate the head of a character, it will be useful to plane the movements, but we will see this method later. Now we'll do an example on this first method by drawing frame by frame. I take a color similar to this lighting and with the bright brush I start drawing. The important thing for this animation is timing. That is, I want the lighting to start moving more slowly, at the apex explodes faster movement, and then it will be constant until it fades away. At the beginning there will be more close-up frames. Important thing for the moment is to keep in touch with the starting point. And it doesn't matter if the lighting has different shape, even better. The movement will then move away to increase the speed at the top of the animation. Reaches the explosion point on the left quickly, and more consistently I go to invert the point of origin to make the lighting on the left disappear. Okay, great, now let's do a test. With the direct method we obtain a very organic and casual lighting. It's important to remember the timing with this type of animation, and to help you understand how to apply it best, also observe in reality the movements that surround you. The second method that we see instead is more organized, and it involves drawing elements that will be used as key points, and between them we will place other frames to create the final animation. It's called pose to pose, is especially useful in more complex animation that must not be random but reasoned. I then begin by drawing the lighting at its apex with a more complex shape than the previous one. I already know what the shape will be like at its maximum expression. Let's go back in the timeline and draw the starting point of the lighting. I modify the onion skin a bit so you can see better. And now I draw the initial shape from where the lighting starts. At this point. So I have the first frame where the animation starts, we know where it will arrive at the apex, and now I draw the end point. I then organized the animation by dividing it into three main points to know exactly where it starts and how it ends. Now between these points I add other frames to complete the animation. With this method I will know exactly where the animation ends, but you have to be careful using this way. Timing is also important here to obtain a fluid and captivating movement for the viewer. This is still a very simple animation, but if you have to plan something more complex, such as the movement of a character, it will be essential for you to understand the method. We arrive at the fork, we are almost at the peak of the animation. Okay, with this frame we have reached the apex. Now we'll start to move the lighting also from the point of origin to make it disappear. And I also add this part, a secondary animation that emphasizes the main one. I start it after the main animation. Also for this reason, it's useful to use this method. We already have the timing of the lighting exit, and at a certain point I want there to be another flash, and I add it to the timeline. I'm coming back to the apex. Now I'm starting to make the lighting disappear towards the key point I've already drawn at the end. It would have been more difficult, especially at this point where the lighting splits, to create the animation with the direct method. Here I needed to plan. Okay, now we'll do a test. With the pose-to-pose method, for more complex animations, it's necessary to use it properly. So remember to plan your animation, divide it into 3 keyframes, or more if necessary, and add the in-between frames. Now that we have seen practically all the elements that make up the scene, all we are missing are the flashes of lighting. It was very simple to make. I think it's more difficult to find them. Okay, here. I drew on the track, filling the screen with white. This layer with the opacity filter appears and disappears quickly to show the thunder's glow. Blending mode add. This gives more shine and above all makes the whole thing even more organic. The usual little details that make a scene incredible. We have reached the end of another fantastic tutorial. Today a little shorter than usual. We have seen all the elements that make up this scene and how they make it so alive. Reflection effects for how to show wet ground. Camera movement with focus switching between foreground and background. Dynamic movement of the clouds. And new on this channel, a frame-by-frame animation. I invite you to write in the comments if something is not clear or if you want to delve deeper into a topic. Dreams will update soon, and we'll surely see some beautiful things. Thank you so much for watching, and